Okay. Today our topic is cosmogenesis. And so cosmogenesis is a field that is at the intersection of science and philosophy. So it addresses some of the most fundamental questions about our existence, our environment, and perhaps even can touch on the idea of purpose in the universe. It's a huge topic, both in the academic world, but it also has been very widely popularized for the general public. And yet, until now, the physical and metaphysical understanding of cosmology and of the cosmos are most often two distinct and separated pursuits. So Doug and I are very passionate about this subject, and we have been working and developing a new promising mathematical and metaphysical model that we feel will allow the Institute to contribute to the dialogue. So, what is cosmogenesis? To start, it refers to the origin and the evolution of the universe. It includes the physical universe, all the laws, the structure, and the phenomena happening within it. It involves understanding the processes that led to the formation of the cosmos, from the very initial condition of the universe to its current state today. And so why does it matter? So citing the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, cosmology deals with a physical situation that is a context in the large for human existence. The universe has such a nature that our life is possible. So cosmology is not just about looking far away, looking in the sky and in the past. Its knowledge is being reflected back to us. Learning about the nature of things, their origin, their existence, the initiation, is learning about the context and the environment of our own life. It's learning about our own existence. So we can suddenly see interconnectedness because despite all the complexity that is revealed by modern science, the cosmos seems to evolve as a coherent and harmonious and above all, intelligent organism. So this is a traditional picture in cosmology. You can start looking on the right of the picture, which is the present day now, today. And if you were to observe galaxy around you, what we find is that all the galaxies are receding from us. They are all moving away. So if we were to turn back the clock towards the left, perhaps it seems that we head toward a singular event. This is what we refer to as the origin of the universe. But however, there is a lot of observational evidence for this, but only up to a certain point. There are important and fundamental limits to science that we will see next. We have many different sources of limitation in the project of doing science. We have our limitation of empirical evidence from the scientific method. There are region and scale, energy scale of the universe that are fundamentally inaccessible to our instrument and to our observation. We have our mathematical framework, which is very powerful, but it might not be capable of describing every single aspect of reality in its complete form. We also have the limit of our human cognition and perception. Our sensory perception makes stubborn biases in our models. But perhaps most about the limit of science, the most important idea is described here by Freeman Dyson, that as human beings, we are groping for knowledge and understanding of the strange universe in which we are born. We have many ways of understanding, of which science is only one. Science is a particular bunch of tools that have been conspicuously successful for understanding and manipulating the material universe. Religion is another bunch of tools giving us hints as of a mental or spiritual universe that transcends the material universe. And now Doug will speak about the ideas behind the models that we have been developing and working on.
Thank you, Laura. So as she explained, we're at the sort of potential limits of empirical science as it pertains to the universe before the Big Bang. So it makes sense that an inherently interdisciplinary institution is well suited to explore this topic. And at the BI, we have expert Sanskritists, philosophers, historians, mathematicians. We have full-time astrophysicists and cosmologists. As you can see behind me, we have access to a vast library as well as online academic resources. So as if understanding cosmogenesis wasn't hard enough from a physical standpoint of view, she clearly thought that we need also a metaphysical understanding. This raises questions that we have to confront and address, like consciousness as a first cause in an eternal universe. In other words, how can something exist outside of space and time in an eternal universe? So this requires distinguishing between temporal causation, which is sort of like one event happening after another, which is what we do in physics. And then there requires distinguishing between metaphysical causation, which is the grounding of existence itself. Further, we have the notion of contingency and necessity. So contingent beings like ourselves rely on external factors for our existence. A primal consciousness is posited as the necessary ground for being. It's existing by necessity and is the source of all existence. Then there's the idea of the anthropic principle, which has many variations, but generally speaking, the suggestion is that the universe is finely tuned for our existence to experience it. Then there is a relationship between consciousness and matter, which Akundity has spoken at length on, and the topic of the nature of space and time that Dr. Gupta has spoken on. So this is obviously a big task, and one that we're trying to develop what we're calling a consciousness-based universe model. So we're introducing a novel mathematical and metaphysical framework for modeling cosmogenesis and the emergence of a dynamically updating universe. And this is influenced by conscious intention. But remember, to paraphrase yesterday's talk, that the map is not the territory. We really want to emphasize that here, the math is not the territory. In other words, as scientists, we tend to overreach and over-extrapolate with our models as if it were reality as it is. But this is just a model. But going with that, so if the universe is supported by consciousness and consciousness gives rise to information, as previous speakers like Giridhari has just mentioned, we need to explore the significance of intention and purpose. And then we can look at how information could be a carrier directed by consciousness. So with our consciousness universe, this is going to be reliant on intention and translate that into a manifested universe. So how can that be done? We know the physical laws about how the natural world arises. Intention acts as an ordering force for the evolution of the universe. So we consider the cosmos as what we call a well-ordered whole. We start with the premise of the universe as a comprehensive and kind of organic view of the cosmos that's supported by consciousness at the most fundamental layer. And we say that it's process-oriented. So what do we mean by that? Generally, in physics, we speak of reductionism, the fundamental building blocks from which the fundamental stratum of the universe gives rise to the macro. But this model is more process-driven. We explore how matter transitions from a potential state to an actual perceivable state by conscious entities. And this happens through the intentions of conscious beings like ourselves. But it also includes causal connections and the rules of the system in general. And this model is essentially relational. That means to understand the universe as a whole, coherent and harmonious system, we want to look at how its components are being defined through their interactions and their relations within this whole. The last property that we pose is that the universe is eternal and cyclic. So if you look at this diagram, it looks like the one that Laura showed, where you have the universe evolving in space and time back to some sort of singular event, which may or not be the case. Either way, a new universe will arise from that. So the universe is a continuous movement of the becoming of the cosmos, originating from consciousness in sort of an eternal dynamic process. Okay, so let's look at the model itself. This is, on the left-hand side, this figure, I'm just showing a very simple schematic of what is going on. These little blue circles, you can imagine is sort of a causal web of conscious elements like ourselves. We have interactions with each other and with an external world. On the right, what you're seeing is sort of a network of pre-matter, basically the fundamental, essential building blocks of what can become matter. So these are like two interacting webs, and this is before space and time have emerged. So on the right, you'll see this feedback loop, which I'm going to explain with a simple analogy. It's just an analogy, but imagine yourself inside perfectly clear water, like a clear ocean. You don't have the other senses like of pressure or taste. All you're doing is looking. And there's nothing in that perfectly clear space where there are any relations forming. And you can't see the individual water molecules. But imagine a little patch of that where the temperature has just gotten much, much colder. So what do you know from that in your experience? Well, you get ice forming like a crystal. So now all of a sudden there is a perceivable landscape in front of you. It's now in a state where you can actually perceive it. And that's called a phase transition, like phase transition from ice to water. So in our model, what you have basically is on the left side, these conscious elements each have their own intentions. And as Akandati explained yesterday, there's sort of an aggregate intention among all of the conscious entities. That is translated and received by what we'll just call an ordering force that's governed by, sort of the primal conscious agent. And that is directed to sort of order this field on the right of the elements that will become material matter. So what that does is it causes relations and interactions between these elements on the right that become more ordered and more structured, to the point where if they sort of achieve a really high level of ordering, it's like undergoing a phase transition. So what we're saying is what happens then is that matter has now gone from a potential state to a state that's real in space and time, to be perceived by conscious entities. So this is a lot to take in, but I'm just going through it quickly. What you're seeing in this diagram is on the left side. So imagine if you think of ice, it's very, on the micro level, it's very well structured. It's highly ordered. It looks like what we call a lattice on the left. So what we're showing here is before space and time, this matter, this pre-matter has become so ordered based on the intention and the ordering force that what happens is there's essentially a spontaneous creation of space and time on the right, basically a development of a material universe. So this is a pretty interesting way to think about it. So what makes this really unique is that now you have space and time being emergent from conscious intention. It gives a mechanism for how the universe can arise, but there are also other interesting repercussions. So looking at Laura's diagram, but now vertically, where you have sort of the initial event, let's say the cosmogenesis event at the top, and time going more towards today as we go down. As we perceive these events, there are relations occurring, and space emerges to basically accommodate these relations that we can perceive as a physical landscape. So physical space will be expanding the more and more relations occur. But that also means that our experiential landscape will keep growing. So over time, the universe will keep expanding and expanding, which is what we see in cosmology. And then ultimately, you sort of run out of potential relations and new interactions. So the universe sort of starts to wind down because there are less experiences for conscious entities. So this actually gives a natural and physical mechanism for the universe to exhaust itself and go back to a potential state. So now we have the mechanism for the beginning of a universe, a physical universe, and sort of the infolding of the universe back to a potential state where this cycle will just continue eternally. So these are some new insights that we think are going to be particularly of interest in the dialogue in the academic world and hopefully in the public level as well, so that consciousness is fundamental to the universe. Space and time are emergent. They are not the fabric behind which everything else happens. Ordered relations give rise to a physical universe to be experienced by conscious entities, and the exhaustion of potential relations result in new cycles and an eternally evolving process. So this is really exciting. It's very preliminary, but given that, as Giridhari said, please reach out and get involved. We could use the help. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Doug and Laura. You've explained something which is very highly complex and maybe a topic that many of our listeners aren't familiar with, but perhaps there are some who are familiar with this, and we would encourage them to get in touch with you. There's no specific questions at this stage, but I think we'd all wish you well on the development of this model. I've seen the papers that they're developing, and it's seriously sophisticated, and I think what they have just offered. You've got just a little time, Doug or Laura, to answer one question from how do we find time and how do we define space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can consider time in different modalities throughout the evolution of the universe. But once the physical universe has arisen, what we're calling space is basically an event that occurs that can be perceived. And the updating of that event based on conscious intention is the perception of time. It's the flow of time that is the updating of this physical landscape. So that's how we're defining time in this case. If that's a little too technical, I can try again. Let me know.
Well, we just got in the last minute or so that we have you as well as Giridhari. He has just answered one of the questions in the chat, which said, can you explain how wisdom begins with who am I? And Giridhari said, because the answer to that question, who am I, is self-evident from our point of view as jivas, and it is so undeniable, it's such an undeniable truth that we are conscious. So that's why the only thing we can know for certain is I exist as a conscious experiencer. That's the one thing that doesn't have to be proved by science or philosophy. You can have confidence in that. Another question, how can someone cooperate with cosmology scientific groups? And Giridhari has asked them to write to info@bihstudies.org. I think that the email address and the website have been available through the materials on this summer school. Get in touch if you have an interest on that. Thank you very much, Doug, Laura, and Giridhari for that little